Introducing the next speaker. At this very magnificent and important conference. I love that this is happening, and of course in my hometown, Bergen. It's very cool. So the next speaker is a games designer committed to making very good games. And in order to do that, he's worked in the industry from all angles. So he's worked with companies such as Activision, with the franchise Call of Duty, which I'm presuming most of you have heard of. And he's also worked with Zynga and social games. So through his consulting agency, Rainmaker Games, he's worked on a spectacular array of games and become an expert on each genre and platform. In addition to that, he's also taught game design at DigiPen and pretty much making sure that the next generation of game designers are really good game designers. And he's also, incidentally, become a celebrity for his passion for games and for sharing information about how to create great games. He's created a web series called Extra Credits, which has gotten over millions of views now. And it's pretty much the fact that it's gotten so big that he was actually at Burger King yesterday, and the guy behind the counter asked for an autograph. So he's pretty famous around town. He's also admirably gotten very involved in politics lately. And he's started an initiative called Games for Good. So through his Games for Good program, he's started to elevate the discussions we're having about games up to a much higher level and start talking about them seriously, a lot like what this conference is doing these 2 days. So, and I'm also extremely honored that he's a colleague of mine now. So James Portnow is actually going to be our interim design director for a new publishing company called Skolen Games, which we're launching, incidentally, tomorrow night, so please come to our launch if you're around town. But yeah, please give it up for James Portnow.
Thank you all for having me here. That was very flattering. So I guess that actually saves me several minutes on talking about who I am. Throughout this, you will have to forgive me because I left California at noon on Sunday and arrived here midnight last night. So who knows how this is gonna go. But yeah, what I wanted to talk to you guys about today is, as Lynn said, I've been getting more and more involved in politics and education, in what more we can do with games. And over the past year, I was actually asked to serve as the senior advisor to the president on digital media. And as we're going through the vetting process and talking about it, one of the big things that came up time and again was obviously education, right? And it's so important because today, first off, we have an amazing medium for this. We have the world's first interactive mass media, right? The first mass media where you don't just sit there and listen to me tell you my ideas, right? You communicate, you interact. But additionally, a lot of times when I go to schools, we run into this problem that, at least in the US, when our school system was developed 150 years ago, when we borrowed the Prussian system, best thing a kid had to do outside of school was hit a ball with a stick. And it was hard to get them to go do their homework then. And now we got film and television, video games, Facebook, YouTube. And I see people struggling to sort of overcome all these other things that children have to do. But what we've got to learn is actually those are the things that are doing it right? Our leisure time has become so much more engaging, but our school hasn't. And it's time that we catch up. So with that thought in mind, I'm actually going to start you with exactly where not to catch up. Because a lot of you guys have probably have talked a lot about this idea of gamification, right? This idea of a system of badges or trophies, things like skill trees or leveling and point systems and you know, And some of this stuff is actually really good, right? This is a great definition of it. I love Mozilla's idea of badges. Badges are a visual representation of skill or achievement. And it's true. There's some value to that, understanding that you're making progress, because that is something that students struggle with. But there's this weird thing that you have to realize as we talk about this style of gamification, as we talk about using these principles of games, these very surface principles of games, for our schools, which is the idea of badges. We've had that since we've been trying to hit each other with stones and sticks, right? We've certainly had it since the Boy Scouts. Napoleon famously said it's amazing what a man will do for a small piece of ribbon, right? So we've had badges and point systems. Well, Weight Watchers incentivized real-world activities with point system years ago, and all the time, frequent flyer miles. I mean, I certainly know I get levels and levels of that, right? Skill trees we've had since we started making modern games back in 40s and 50s. So why now? Why is this just coming up now? Why do we have this rage for gamification now? And truth is, it's these guys. Unlike most we'd consider traditional games, video games, even your sort of serious hobby board game tabletop industry, these guys made the news all the time, right? These guys entered the consciousness of people who weren't aware of games before. And so a lot of people who were doing education sometimes, especially at least in the political side in the United States, saw these guys and said, oh, well, they're using all this stuff, all these point systems and badges, they're using these timers to get people to do repetitive, monotonous activities they don't want to do over and over again. That's what we should be doing. Yeah. So, there's a problem with that. Even more than the fact that we shouldn't be doing repetitive, monotonous activities that people don't want to be doing over and over again. And it's really that these guys, everything they did comes from the work of this man. A lot of you guys probably recognize him. His name is B.F. Skinner. He's a behavioralist in the vein of Pavlov, right? And Pavlov would ring the bell and dogs would salivate and great. But B.F. Skinner was like, oh, I totally can do one better. And he said, you know what? Pavlov is conditioning people, conditioning animals to have an instinctual response. But I can bet I can condition conscious action. And so that's why he got famous for putting pigeons in boxes. He put a pigeon in a box, put a button on the side of the box, and every time the pigeon pressed the button, it would get a pellet of food. And then he would take away, and only sometimes it would get a pellet of food. And he would come up with these schedules, these reward systems that if he did it in the right schedule, eventually the pigeon would just press and press and press and press and press the button, even though no food was coming out. And he had conditioned this action, right? Pressing a button is a conscious action. It's not something that you do by instinct. It's not something that nature gives us. And you know who uses his research? You know where this man made the majority of his money? Slots. Any casino that you go to, this is the research that they're using, right? This is the foundation of what gets us to pull that lever over and over and over again. But there's something we have to realize, which is that kids aren't pigeons, schools aren't slots, right? This is about engagement and not addiction. Yes, as a game designer, I can absolutely write a reward schedule for you and a point system that will get a kid to do their math and just do math problems over and over and over and over again. In fact, this is actually what a lot of bad games at their core level are. But there's this problem. Zynga used to do studies all the time. They would do psychological studies continuously, and they would go and interview players of their game, especially people who had played for a really long time. And some of these interviews, they would ask questions like, tell me about the last game you played, right? Tell me about the last 15-minute play session you had. And they found that people couldn't recall very much. Almost nothing, as a matter of fact. And when they asked for specific details, they'd be like, oh, I planted some stuff and I harvested some stuff. And for the majority of players, though, they didn't remember exactly what they did. And this is the problem, right? We could condition them to do this activity, but not to get anything from it. And sometimes when they asked them, well, did you enjoy it? The people would look at them and go, you know, I don't think I did. I don't know why I'm playing. And it's because there's just that underlying system which conditions you, which addicts you to do this. And that's not what we got to do in schools. Because we've learned the same thing over and over again, right? There are studies, lots and lots of studies, that tell us that children who are given a reward, an external reward, an extrinsic reward for doing an activity, are actually less likely to do it on their own, won't do it as well on their own if they're not continuously fed that reward. So what we're looking for is intrinsic value. We're looking for engagement in the activity rather than some reward that has nothing to do with the activity, like points or badges. Which brings me to this idea of the principles of play. We have, through making games and film and television, come to realize certain things that are universal about how to engage a human being. And it's time that we use that for more than just leisure time, right? It's time that we use that for more than just passing the hours between work and sleep. And there's simple things. Because I know a lot of teachers come up to me and say, well, I don't have enough computers in the classroom for all my students. We can't play games in the classroom. And the truth is, I'd love to use games directly. And I'll talk about that later. But first, we have to learn all the things that all these entertainment industries already know. And they're simple things, right? You never see a game where you start with 1,000,000 points and lose points and lose points and lose points and up and then shut off your monitor. Up, we're back. Lose points and oh, sad day, right? You never have that. And yet, so many students walk into a classroom and on the first day they conceptualize themselves as having an A. And they just fall and fall until they finally find a place where they can tread water. And yet, we've done so many psychological studies which show that human beings are better engaged and do better at tasks where they see themselves making progress, where they see themselves falling behind or just treading water. All we have to do is change the way we grade. I don't know how you do it here, but in the United States, it's simple things like that, right? There's other principles. Just grading up and instead of down, or if it's any piece of entertainment, right? Whether it be Star Wars, The Godfather, music, right? Every pop song you ever listen to, from the Beatles to Nirvana, has the exact same underlying structure. We have learned that to engage a human being, this is the graph of sort of tension over time or engagement over time. There's lots of different ways you can write this, but this is the graph. And when I talk to teachers, very often, especially teachers who don't have a lot of experience with games and see games as conflicting with how they teach and for their students' attention, I ask them, so tell me about how you think the excitement or engagement goes in a game. And sometimes they say, oh, well, it's just so engaging all the time. And this is actually false. Or other times they say, oh, it's just continuously getting more engaging. But you can't do that. Human beings don't like doing that. It's like eating candy, right? Your first piece you eat, it tastes great. After 3, you're pretty much done. 6, and you start just getting sick at the sight of it. You don't want that level of super massive saturated engagement. It's what bad, terrible action films do. And so we actually have all these built-in lulls to what we're doing, which is super important, right? Star Wars. Has everybody seen Star Wars? Raise your hands. Okay, good. Yeah, that's most of you. So right up here, right, you got that amazing, awesome sequence where they're fighting, and you've got the Star Destroyers flying in, and you've got the princess getting captured, and there's so much excitement. We've got the hook at the beginning. And then what's this? This is moisture farming, right? We need Luke hanging out as a moisture farmer on a desert planet with his, like, ancient quasi-parents, because we can't sustain that. And why this is amazing for education is because all those places that are less exciting in your lesson plan, we can build them into those natural lulls. I actually started writing a series on YouTube. We've been writing this series about game design forever, right? And so I started writing this series on YouTube called Extra History, where we figured, okay, we're going to take principles like this, apply them to teaching history. We get hundreds of thousands of views, and we get comments all the time. And this is the important part where people go, oh my God, why didn't someone teach me history like this when I was in high school? And the only difference, right, I'm teaching the exact same stuff. It's all fairly high level, like a lot of depth for history. The only difference is in how I organize the information, right? So we can use principles like this as we're thinking about our lesson plans to increase engagement. And beyond that, there's a million things, right? We see sports stars or rock stars or painters all the time talk about this idea of being in the zone, right? There's this concept of flow that we sometimes talk about that is this state you get into where you're sort of achieving at your peak performance consistently, and it's a state where you break barriers, where you hit new plateaus. And this flow chart is actually super important because there's a great book by a guy, I'm going to butcher his name, but it's like Csikszentmihalyi, who he writes a book called Flow, and it's about exactly how we achieve getting into this flow state. And you don't get into this flow state naturally. You don't get into this flow state arbitrarily. You get into this flow state by having consistent match between challenge and skill, right? And in game, whenever we're designing a game, we have to build for this. We want you in this flow state. So what we do is we ramp up the challenges in accordance. So as you get better at the game over time, right, as time goes on and your skill goes up, we match a challenge with it to try and get you in that flow channel. And we don't get it right for everybody. We get it right for a lot of people. And then this year, in this exploration of schools, I must have flipped through 40 math textbooks. And I watched how they organized the problems that they were giving kids on homework. And they were just arbitrary, right? They were just math problems thrown in there. They weren't any consideration of challenge to skill. They weren't any attempt to help the student ramp up their skill as they got towards the harder. They were just, here's some problems to test you out on. Simply by rearranging those problems, would we get it right for everybody? No, absolutely not. But we would get it right for more people. It costs us nothing, right? These are all the things that we can get from a look at the entertainment industry and using these principles. Principles which cost us nothing, which aren't hard to implement in our schools, and are so much more effective than simply adding points or badges. So, with that, let's talk about why we care, right? Because, as I said, we're past this idea of extrinsic engagement. Let's go to intrinsic engagement. And very often, I feel like as teachers, and even for myself when I've taught, I've caught myself in this trap. We've got so much to teach that we spend all of our time thinking about, okay, in these few little class days I have, what do I need to teach these students? And we spend so much time so focused on the what, we don't think about the why. Why would these students want to learn? Much less thinking about how do they want to learn, right? What is the way, what is the tools that we're going to use to engage them? And so it's just taking that step back and in all of our busy schedules, getting past that question of what it is that we're going to teach, because there's so much more to effectively teach it. I was engaged by a company called Pearson, which is a textbook manufacturer. I don't know if they do textbooks for you guys, but there's massive conglomerate. And anyway, in the US, they brought me in because there's this big push to get women engaged in the STEM subjects, science, technology, engineering, mathematics. And they brought me in and said, hey, can you do a game for young women ages like 8 to 13, just before high school, who are sort of struggling with science? And can you make a game to engage these young women in science? And I was like, wow, that sounds like a really interesting challenge. Sure, I'll try it. And I sat down. I came into this classroom, and they had brought in all these young women in this test classroom, and we sat down, and I brought out this box of beads, and I gave them all beads and string. And I would tell them the story, right? I tell them about there's this tribe, and this tribe builds these ritual necklaces. And every year, as you grow, you get to put another bead on your necklace. But because it's a ritual, it's very specific how you have to put the beads. There's a certain color and size and order that you have to do. And when you reach a certain age, the pattern changes and you can do some other stuff. And I would ask them, hey, everybody, can you make the necklace for your age? And they would get excited and they'd go make the necklace. I'd be like, oh, that's awesome. You guys are super smart. Can you make the necklace for this age and this age? And I'd watch them help each other, right? I'd see these young women go, oh no, it's actually like this, right? And they'd talk to people who were struggling and work with them to make sure that everybody got the right, and the success rate was huge. And then I'd show them that what they were actually building was these. And they were not only building electron shells, They were building electron shells at a mid-college level, at a 201 level. Because we had color and shape and size to work with, we were able to do subshells and all the other stuff, right, that you usually don't even get in high school. And these girls just nailed it because they had learned the system, they had learned the intimidating part, the part that people had told them they shouldn't be good at, right? The part that we usually abstract with these really cold-looking algorithms or pictures that are entirely representational but lacking beauty. And instead, they got to learn it in a case that they loved to learn it in. And then after that, I would ask them, right, can you build me iron? Can you build me element 23, right? And they could do it. They could all do it because they learned in that context. And so we've just removed the scaffolding. But the really important part happened just after this. Because after we did a whole day of this and we had worked on this stuff, and they saw that, yes, they could do science, right? That this block that had been in front of them wasn't a real problem with them, which was how most of them conceived it, but rather was simply a problem with how they were being taught and what they thought about what they were supposed to learn. Because at the end, I would sit with them and I'd tell them that what they had just learned were the building blocks of everything, right? You want to know why the wind blows or why water is wet. You want to know how we're constructed or what the stars are made of, right? That's these things. You want to build things of true beauty. It's all built here. This is where it all starts. And by giving them that reason to care, I still get emails from teachers who were part of this program telling me these students are doing great, right? These are some of these kids are going off and applying to schools for the math and sciences because they were not only engaged in a system that, in a way that they cared about, in a way that they were interested in a way that they were inherently engaged in what they were doing, where retention is its highest, because that's an important step. That's a necessary step. But that's just the first step. Then we took away that scaffolding and showed them, here's the transference, because this is a problem. This is something we all struggle with. How do we get, there's so many great things to learn in games. How do we get that transference? And it's really as simple as all of you, right? I hear teachers worry about the idea that electronics or games are going to replace the teacher, and it's just never going to happen. The teacher's too important for the classroom. And it's because we need people like you making that connection. I was down in Brazil talking at a school called Oi Futuro Navi, and there were some students, again, math, young men who didn't really like math class. They were getting D's in their math. And I caught them one day playing World of Warcraft. And they were doing really high-level math for World of Warcraft. And I told them, hey, that's the same thing that you have to do on your homework and your tests. And it blew their minds for a moment. But then I found out after that, didn't become A-plus students, became solid B students, just by having someone help make that connection, show them that, hey, all these other things, what we're teaching in the school isn't just this abstraction away from everything, but something real and concrete that matters in your life and that you're already doing and that you are good enough and know how to do. But the last part's the most important part. Why, right? Whether it's you care about this math because you're going to beat Anixia because of it, or you care about these atoms because really that's how our universe is the beautiful, amazing place it is. And so that's the last part, and I think we too often skip that part. But I wanted to make sure that I have no idea how much time I have left. I want to make sure I wanted to get to talking about games themselves. For a lot of you, you're probably interested in using games in the classroom. This may be less relevant to you because I will fully admit, I do not know how the struggles that you guys have in education here. But in the United States, games inherently, just by the way that they are, solve a lot of the problems that we are currently struggling with about the modern classroom. First off, solutions, not retention. This is the key part of games. Our school system began in a period where schools were these warehouses of knowledge, right? You better learn your multiplication tables. You better learn those historical dates because when you're a clerk or a factory worker or whatever you're going to be, these things, these industrial age things that we're moving you to when we're moving you out of this agrarian society and into this new modern industrial world, well, if you didn't learn them in school, there is nowhere else to go for them, right? And so you have to retain them all up here. But today Today, that's not the problem. We're not moving people from an agrarian society into an industrial society. Today, we're moving people from an industrial society into our information age future. And today, in the palms of our hands, on the internet, on Wikipedia, right, we have access to more raw data than all of the aggregated libraries in the 19th century. And so today, the problems facing our students to be successful individuals in the next century are not going to be problems of, do you remember it up here? But rather, if you encounter a problem you've never seen, do you know how to use the information at your fingertips to solve that problem? And that's what every game does. Go play any game and you'll see that all of these systems are laid out for you. And every game asks you, here's a problem, right? Take over this town, beat this dragon, whatever it may be. Here's a problem. Use your tools, figure out a way to solve it. It's about solutions and not simply retention. Second, this idea of iterative learning, right? We have this problem in the States where we hand a student a piece of homework and then they go and they do it over the night. They hand it in the next day, and 1 week later, teacher hands it back with a grade on it. And what does the student do with it? They shove it in their bag, right? And they never look at it again. Because it's not the teacher's fault, right? You've got 60 students or whatever you've got to grade their papers for. Of course it's going to take you a week to do it. But by the time you get there, well, you can't regrade all those papers, and you can't regrade every paper every time a student wants to try something new. And so the student is left realizing, I might as well not even care because whatever, I've got to move on to the next thing. And for this piece of work, I can't redo it. I can't get any more value out of it. And for the student, even if they could, by the time they get it back, they're stuck. Having moved on, having gone to other stuff, and maybe probably not even remembering why they were doing what they were doing, like what choices they made that led them to that score. And this is actually a huge problem for a number of reasons. Not least of all, because this time for feedback loop that we've got creates this fear of failure. We have this system where this test, this piece of homework, you get one chance to do it, right? And you do it right, or you get a bad grade, and mom and dad are disappointed. And what that leads to is this idea that failing is terrible, that I got one shot for, but that's not how the modern world works. For any decent job of the future, what companies are going to ask students is not get it right on the first try. What companies are going to ask people is get me the best solution the fastest. And how you do that is try and fail and try and fail and try and fail. Not be paralyzed until you get the absolute perfect answer. And that's the system we're creating. Also, we have this huge amount of time. We're giving students 2, 3, 4 hours of homework a night, but we're using it as an assessment. All our homework does right now is tell me, did the student actually learn the things I thought I taught them in class? We don't have the time for that, right? This is 4 hours a night that the student could be learning things. And so in a world where we have to teach as much as we have to teach these days, we need those hours. And if you, in a game, take that same loop, right? Whereas a game, I have this dragon I got to beat. So I form a hypothesis about how to beat it. I throw myself at it. Oh, I lose, right? I get up a second later. I try it again. And so if you're using games in class, you can immediately overcome this idea that homework is only an assessment, because that iterative loop, that try, test, figure out an answer, is how we teach ourselves most things. And so you can actually have learning going on. You can have active learning during homework time, which is a vast amount, 30, 40% more hours a day of learning. Additionally, tailoring lessons, right? No matter what your class size is, I was teaching college classes, I had maybe 15 students in some of them. I could not tailor my lessons to every single student in the classroom, no matter how much I wanted to. And there were times where I tried. And yet, by integrating games and using games in the classroom, we can actually do a great deal more of that. We have games all the time where you're sitting there for a minute, you don't know exactly what to do, you're sitting here, this message will pop up, right? And it'll just tell you, okay, we've noticed that you haven't shot for 6 seconds on the targeting range. You should probably pull this button, and it'll shoot for you. And we can do that with a lot of different things, right? You're not getting your algebra. Computer can notice that and say, okay, let's roll you back to one of the problems from last week and start you there and see if that can kickstart your thinking. It can try a bunch of things, and then it can email you, the teacher, at the end of the day and say, hey, here's what we tried, here's where they were missing, here's where you got them to, here was what was most successful getting them to there. So that way you can fill in the gaps when you go and sit with and work with them. But the idea that by embracing games, by embracing these underlying systems that can not only see the final result of what the students are doing, which is what we see as teachers, but also see the process of how they get there, we can actually adapt on the fly how we're teaching them and how we're assigning them as they're going through. So that's another huge benefit games have. We additionally have 21st century skills. Most of you probably have heard this a million times, but in the US there was this big study which said, okay, we're going to talk to all these major companies, we're going to talk to the best universities and ask, what do we need to teach students for them to be effective citizens in the 21st century? And the results they got were these four: critical thinking, communication, collaboration, and creativity. I can't think of 4 things we practice more every day through playing games, right? Doesn't matter if it's Call of Duty or League of Legends. These are teamwork is core to all these games. You watch the level of coordination that has to go on to win one of these matches, and that's an incredible thing. You want to watch somebody learn creativity. You want to see somebody get better at creativity. This thing that sometimes in the US we talk about as unteachable. Watch a kid play Minecraft for a year. And that's what you'll see. You'll see a kid being taught to exercise their creativity, to not be afraid of their creativity, and then to become more creative. And then logical thinking, we have games like Hearthstone, which are exactly that, logical sequences over and over and over again. Or lateral thinking, things like Portal, right? All these 21st century skills are applicable in almost every game that you play. And so we just need to be able to, if we can embrace them in the classroom, make that transference. And say, you know, all those skills you use to communicate when you're about to do a team fight in League? Well, for those of you who play League, this may not be the best example, but use those to work with the group here, right? Use all those things that you learned about how important every member of that team is and how you couldn't just do this whole thing on your own. Use that when you're sitting down doing this group project. And so 21st century skills, another thing the game gives us. But perhaps the smallest thing, and this is what I want to end on because this is perhaps to me the most important as well. I was in a lower income school. I was working with a lower income school. I wasn't teaching there. I was helping out. And I would come in and brought in Super Mario Brothers. And I had brought it in to teach the kids about the scientific method. But then this one kid, he picks it up, he starts playing. And I mean, this is a school where you don't go to college, where pregnancy is just something that happens. It was a school where one time I heard a kid talk about how he couldn't do his homework because he was hiding in the bathtub because people were shooting outside. And this kid sits down, he plays Super Mario Brothers, right? And he runs and he jumps and he falls in this pit. And he runs and he jumps and he falls in the pit. And he runs and he jumps and he gets over the pit. And it didn't kick the door wide open, but it opened up just enough that we could start having this conversation about how the fact that was his life, right? That he had agency. He had control of his life. There was some path, just like there was some path to get over that pit. It may be difficult, but there is some path that he can take to get to college. There is some path to get the things that he wants, whether it's be a basketball star or a rocket scientist. There is some path, and it may seem silly to us, but this was a kid who was only thinking in the moment. To him, conceptually, college was something he was never thinking about. There were no real long-term goals, and when they weren't structured as goals, they were structured as dreams. Right? And by having this moment in this game and seeing that he had agency, by seeing time compressed to this small section, this one part of this game, and by seeing himself repeat the same action in 3 different ways and get different results, we start having this conversation. And this is an amazing and powerful thing because what are schools supposed to do? Schools are supposed to leave us with a love of learning, and they're supposed to leave us better able to get the lives we want. And that's agency. And that's something that games inculcate every day. And that's some place where I would love to see us be able to work together to deliver on. So I'll leave you with that thought and ask for yours. Because as much as what I have to say may be hopefully interesting to some of you, I'm here to learn as well. So do we have any questions, comments, thoughts? Do we want a second mic that we can run around? All right. I will just hand you off this one.
Noen spørsmål? Any questions?
Do I have this on? I do have this on. All right, good. I got it.
Hi.
All right.
Are kids then playing games since they are duly rewarded there in opposition to education where they are not rewarded properly according to their skills?
Sorry, can you repeat that one more time?
Yeah, it was quite long, so I had to write it down. I'm reading my own text here. Are kids playing games in general since they are duly rewarded there in opposition to education where they are not rewarded properly according to their skills?
So I believe, so the question is, and correct me if I'm wrong, but the question is, are students playing games because in games they're properly rewarded for their skills in a way that they aren't in education? And I think to some degree this is true, right? Some degree it's because it's more engaging, but some degree it's also because, yes, you're absolutely right. If you're a really good League of Legends player, you can get up to Diamond relatively fast, and you always see yourself making progress, and you're not gated by the fact that the class can only move as fast as, maybe not as slow as students, but certainly not as fast as students. But again, if we integrate play into the classroom, especially if you're doing things like games, they can allow students to explore other things. They can even help students explore other things and give them new ideas to run and take as a springboard into new places. So I do think that is a problem. That is a problem with our schools. It may not be one that we're able to solve on a mass scale, but when we have something like a game that allows us to deliver a personalized education, then we may be able to overcome that problem. But great question. Are there others? Anybody else? All right, we're a very quiet group. I'm gonna buy you guys like 5 more seconds where I say meaningless words, see if anybody has any other questions, and if not, I am going to be able to get off the stage and eventually get some sleep, which is gonna be awesome. So last chance, questions. Oh, we got one in the back? All right, let's do it. Yeah, he was like, oh, I'm totally not letting that jerk get to sleep. Whatever, no.
Thanks, Tarja.
Do you feel that games are changing in school, that we need to be looking at what kind of stuff we are learning them? Also, that not just that we have to be changing our curriculum?
Do we have to be changing our curriculum? I think so, but I don't know how it is here, right? Like I was talking about creativity. In the US, we don't think we can teach creativity. We don't think, we consider yourself, I mean, this is a little bit hyperbole, but really we consider you either a creative person or not. And we don't think of it as something that, hey, you can practice creativity. You can get better at using your creative faculties. Things like that, yeah, we absolutely have to teach in classes. And I think we do have to change our curriculum around some of the skills that are the softer skills that we never thought you could teach up until we saw people learning them all the time through games. All right, last chance. All right, I'm done. All right, thank you. Oh, we got one more. No! No, this is great.
Yeah, sorry about that.
Oh, no. It's actually really good.
Well, this is not so much a question as I just want your thoughts on something.
Sure.
Since you're obviously working on this far more than me. I'm a teacher, and I've been working a lot with problem-based teaching. We give them pretty open assignments, and they work with it. And I hear you and earlier today also talking about that this is what we should be doing. We should be giving them that kind of assignments where they should be creative. History is not important. What I find, and this is what I want your thoughts about, is that they really very soon run into problems they don't know about because they don't have enough facts. One example is gave them an assignment on the Second World War, and they didn't know enough about the Second World War. They kept mixing up world wars. They mixed up. They couldn't use their creativity. They couldn't use their own thinking. Your turn.
So no, it's actually it's great because
They had no idea what was going on because they hadn't the facts. They couldn't use their creativity. They couldn't use their own thinking. Your turn.
So no, it's actually it's great because I see this issue a fair amount, and to me, the thing is that for I would approach it the same way we do approach it in games, where the goal is to give them a problem and then all the tools they need to solve it, but let them explore those tools as they find they need them, right? One of the problems is they couldn't immediately get they couldn't immediately find out they were wrong, right? Student writes Hitler when he means Kaiser Wilhelm or vice versa, and he doesn't immediately get a, you died, go back a few minutes, start again, right? And on the flip side, the student may not realize all the possibilities in front of them, where they can go to get those facts, right? And this is one of the things that games do really well, is that they streamline their tooltips or all these other things, there are all these ways that you're trained. So I actually got to ask this. And being honest, anybody in here play Pokemon? We got a couple of you. Okay, for those of you who do, keep your hands up if you know 25 Pokemon. 50, 100, 150. Right, we got well over 100. Think about how many facts it is. Nobody sat them down in a class and taught them that, right? Nobody gave them homework about that. Nobody ever gave them a quiz about that. They learned them because it was an environment that they wanted to solve problems that they needed to solve. And that's the sort of thing that I'm trying to get to. Because if all those Pokemon names were words in a foreign language, right? Those are tools to solve other problems within that language. And so we've got to find ways to create these problem-solving classroom situations where we also provide them the tools to solve those problems and the skills to go out and get those tools. Because clearly the problem was the students didn't think, oh, I better crawl Wikipedia for a while to find the data I need to solve this, right? Or I need to crawl Wikipedia for 2 minutes to find the data I need to solve this. Whereas I bet a bunch of your students did go to all the wikis on Pokemon and things like that. So we need to get them those fundamental fact-finding skills, but I don't think we need to teach the individual facts. We need to teach them to go get those facts as well as give them the problem solving and give them a streamlined way to get there. But no, it's a fantastic question. But I think that is it for me. I will thank you all for having me out here.
Thank you so much, James. It was a very, very good end of the day. And here is a tiny present from us. It's cardboard.
Sweet cardboard.
Yeah.
In boxes.
In boxes and with a code to where to download maps. So, okay. Thank you. Da det faglige programmet for dagen over, men rett over gangen I Sardinen så har vi nå spillbar, hvor noen utviklere har kommet med noen norskutviklede spill, og vi har tapas. Det blir delt ut en drikkebong til hver på vei ut av salen her, så få med dere en drikkebong som kan byttes I en valgfri drikke innen rimelighetens grenser. Og prat med hverandre, del erfaringer fra I dag, ha det gøy.